Absolutely. Well, welcome back to Cool Conversations. I am with, quite a long-term friend, acquaintance.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Greg Nieuwenhuys. He's been so kind. We are in his home today in the beautiful Cotswolds. And if you can see the view out by his windows here, it's something to behold on this beautiful autumnal morning. Greg, welcome to Cool Conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting me. This is
lots of pleasure.
Yeah, we even got an oat milk latte coffee.
Yeah, I hope it tastes good.
Now, we first met, I don't know if you remember this, at the Rouleur.
Yes,
London.
I do, yeah.
And you were with Dion Taylor.
Yes, yeah.
And I bumped into you, and Dion was incredibly excited to introduce you to me. And he followed up afterwards with an email.
Yeah.
Kind of describing a little bit about you. And to say that that introduction was somewhat impressive from him about you is an understatement. Now, how would you describe yourself?
Oof, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I guess I'm Greg. I live in the Cotswolds for the last 4 years. I have 5 kids. So that makes my life very busy.
That's a good coffee, by the way.
Good. Well, at least I can make a good coffee. And I just love living and love doing fun things. And usually when I try to do things, I try to do them well, and I enjoy that. And life is just one big feast, so it's to be enjoyed. So
Dion, take it back. When was the Rouleur? It must have been 4 or 5 years ago now.
I think it must have been 16 or 17.
Yeah, about that. Yeah. And so let's take it back. And that email from Dion was full of words such as impressive, visionary, driven. And it went on and on and on. It was quite impressive. And perhaps the viewers and listeners don't know, you are an accomplished businessman, CEO of some huge companies. You are a very accomplished runner, ski mountaineer, climber, family man, and it goes on and on and on. So diving into this, I think the first thing that we'd all like to know, especially me, is 5 children. Until relatively recently, you headed up what many of the viewers would know as Snow and Rock, Cotswold, Runners World, Cycle Surgery.
Yeah.
You were CEO of that group. I don't know what its turnover was, but I presume it's running into billions.
Yeah, it's a couple of 100 million.
Yeah, a couple of 100 million company. You're heading up that. You're pushing yourself on your athletic front. How do you do it? Do you have some special insight to a 32-hour day that none of us, the other ones that of us don't?
Well,
your life balance is...
Well, I have to say I have 5 kids now. We had twins that were born 18 months ago. And they were, that was a surprise really. We weren't really expecting more children. And they were quite unwell, so that was a moment for me to step out of the job. So I haven't really done all of these things together while having 5 kids. I only did it when I had 3.
Only 3 children.
Because
shame on you. Only.
Yeah, since then I've been working, but a lot less. And but I think before that, I think I think the trick is I have an amazing wife. That's probably you must know that when you're on expeditions, you have to have a great base camp and a great base camp manager, and that's the wife. So if she can't hold it together, then it doesn't work. And I'm very strict on my disciplines. I love to wake up really early. Well, when I'm very driven, I wake up really early. And
define really
early. Like 5 o'clock. So I'll go out running 3 times a week at 5 o'clock in the morning. Just because I don't want to do that at the time when I could see my kids. I just don't want to be a burden to the family, and even in the weekends I'll wake up really early and get the run out of the way before everyone's awake. But also, especially when working a lot and working on complex things, I need the exercise. So I just need to get out and kind of empty my head, and that makes me, I believe, a better CEO, better father, better husband. And I'm quite miserable if I can't get my exercise in. I get really impatient, and the only thing that will calm me down then is alcohol, and that's not a very healthy thing to do. So I prefer running.
It's good to hear that you can juggle all these things and you do drink at the same time. I mean, when I say drink, obviously not to excess, because I mean,
I enjoy beer. Yeah. But typically, when I'm training a lot, I'll drink less.
Yeah.
And then when the training's a bit aside, I'll drink a bit more.
Because it's quite interesting. I've been trying to get him on the show for a while. Rob Forbes, who lives very local to me.
Yeah.
He's quite keen on a beer as well. So Rob, for those who don't know, another amazing ultra runner. I think he actually holds the record for the Cotswold Way.
He does. Very impressive
17
record.
and a half hours.
Yeah.
And having recce'd some of that recently. It's 102 miles.
Well, he's 21 hours, so I mean, that's not very slow, but...
you did in 21?
Yeah. So 17 and a half is very... I think it's going to take a long time before that gets broken.
But he's quite keen on a beer or two as well. I shared a few beers with him. He does runs from pub to pub to pub.
Yeah, which is, that sounds fun.
Very much fun. So there's lots that I want to talk about. As you and we've engaged on and off over the years, and you've always really impressed me with your drive, which you've already mentioned. And one of the things which I've always got the impression is, certainly in the business side of things, is culture. Mm-hmm. The culture of business, of the employees, of the company appeared to be at the very core of everything which you stood for. Would you say
definitely. True? I mean, definitely, and I'm definitely not going to advocate that I've always got it right. Culture, I think, is super important, often overlooked. As in strategy, will be prioritized sometimes. But I think culture in the end has a much bigger impact, because if you have the culture right, and then you'll probably have the right people, because it's a bit vice versa. Good people attract good culture, and vice versa. But if you have the culture right, then things happen by themselves, because people, they think about we have
fly. Yeah. Have you even got your ninja-like skills?
Yeah, exactly.
Fucking out the sky.
Yeah, no, I won't try that. And definitely, like, coming into the UK, for example, there's a big cultural difference between the Dutch and the British, and that in a new company, in a new country, I've found it a lot harder to establish what the right culture was. And even there, I was working. So when I joined Outdoor and Cycle Concepts, which is the mother company of Cotswold Outdoor and Snow and Rock, they had merged 6 months before that. So there was a clash of cultures between Snow and Rock and Cotswold. But I also saw that as something really exciting to work on. Just how can you, because they were quite obviously different, and at the time, the acquisition didn't start off on great feet, so they didn't really like each other that much. But I saw that as a great challenge to how can we get the best of both worlds. And clearly there were some really awesome things in Cotswold that Snow and Rock didn't have, and vice versa. And it was pretty easy to see that if you could combine the two strengths and put them together, it would make a really strong entity. And if you can explain that to the people and they see it and they believe it, then that's already a massive step that you've taken.
And is that what brought you to the UK?
Yes,
it was that role.
Yeah, it was that role. Yeah. So I was already part of the AS Adventure Group, and I led the Dutch entity, which is called Bever. And then this opportunity came along when Hans, my predecessor, retired.
But I knew Hans pretty well, because I actually worked for him many moons ago.
Oh wow!
Just
I didn't know that.
Not just on the shop floor.
Yeah. I know you worked for Snow and Rock for quite a while.
Yeah, well, I worked for Snow and Rock and Cotswold.
Okay. Wow.
So I knew Hans, and he also lived quite locally to here. Didn't
he lives in Uli. Yeah.
I've been to his house a couple of times. So I mean, he guided Cotswold for must be about 15 years, 20 years.
Oh yeah, well I think when he started they had about 10 stores, and when he left, they had 70, and then the Snow and Rock acquisition came on. He kind of, I'd say he's the godfather of the company, really.
And then at, I'm going to get the pronunciation wrong, Bever, where you were before, you were pretty famed for, I'm going to use the term aggressive, an aggressive switch to online not marketing, online retail.
Yeah. Correct.
Which proved to be a masterstroke.
Well, at the time I was very young, so I was 31 when I became CEO of Bever, and I felt like I had lots to prove, and I made so many mistakes in the first 2 years, mostly on the people side, just because not thinking about culture, not hiring the right people, but I was very, very determined to make the online piece work, and the more people looked at me and said, "This isn't right," that was like the fuel for me to push even harder, which is a bit how I am. So clearly it's an element of stubbornness, but I was determined to make that work, and I did see this is clearly the solution to retail. Is you have to be omni-channel and use the internet to become much stronger, and that turned out to be a great bet, and Bever as a result we had amazing years.
I was going to say you grew almost exponentially.
Yeah, and even a small company like Bever, it's at the time turnover less than 100 million. It was recognised a few years in a row for being the best, what they call omni-channel retailer in the Netherlands.
Yeah,
which you wouldn't expect from such a small retailer. So we had a few things right. We still had so many things we needed to do better. But it was really fun. It's a really fun journey, and that I like being in an underdog position where people think, well, that's probably that's too big of an ask. It's too early, and people almost write you off. And then that's where I'm at my best to prove people wrong.
You just keep putting. Is that determination?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's a bit like when I only climbed one 8,000 meter peak, and it's the easiest one, Cho Oyu. But when I went on to do that one, I wanted to ski down from the summit. Also, people said, this is crazy. These guys have no experience. They're not going to make it. But that was like, okay, then we should really look into this seriously and do it.
Well, it's quite interesting because let's segue into your sort of other persona of adventure athlete. You mentioned Cho Oyu, which is the world's sixth highest mountain, 8,201 meters.
Yeah.
On the Chinese-Nepalese border. And you say it's the easiest of the 8,000 meter peaks. There's a couple which people say are the easiest. But it's still an 8,000 meter peak. It's not an easy challenge.
You've got to
approach it in the right way. Yeah. And then you became, I think I'm right in saying this, the first Dutch person to ski an 8,000 meter peak.
Yeah.
So we've got one thing in common between us. I was the first Brit to ski an 8,000 meter peak.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And it was Cho Oyu back in 2006.
Really? Okay, well, so I was earlier than you.
When did you ski it?
2004.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's the only place I'm probably ever going to beat you.
Well, no, there's another one up on Greg over Kenton. Now I feel even less qualified to be sitting here.
No, don't be ridiculous.
And so where did the idea for that come from? Because you were in, you were running. This was much earlier. So this started when I was at university. I'd always been skiing with my family and to France. My mother's French. She passed away 3 months ago. Oh, I'm sorry.
But she was from France, so we always went to the mountains. And at university, I was lucky to meet a few good friends who I shared a house with, and they also had a passion for the mountains. So we got into ski mountaineering, and then suddenly there was the idea like, let's go to Nepal. So we went to Mira Peak.
I'm going there in a couple of weeks, so I might quiz you about it. I've not been there. I might have to quiz you about that.
So I'd never got to the summit of Mira Peak. One of my toes got frozen on the summit attempt where we did make it, and then the guys went back 2 days later. But my toe was it was a bit tricky to go back. Then a few days later we summited Island Peak. That was better. But so I never made it to Mira Peak. But after that trip I realized this is so cool. Now it's time for an 8,000 meter peak, which.
It's quite a jump.
Exactly. That's why people said, these guys are stupid, and we also said we're going to summit, and we're not going to use oxygen. We're going to ski down, and there's a documentary on national television, so we kind of pumped it up, quite big. And so a lot of people were looking at us like, that's those silly, unexperienced students. And this was just about when I was graduating, so I was just starting into my career.
And you graduated from where with what?
Well,
I presume it was a business.
No, it was applied physics, so technology university.
I feel so inferior.
Well, no. So the
physics.
only reason I did that is because I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I just thought, well, again, that was perceived to be like one of the hardest studies you could do in the Netherlands. So I thought, well, if that's really hard, why don't I just do that? See if I can make it.
Is your background one of, because I'm guessing that a physics degree is very logical.
Yes.
It's, applied physics as opposed to theoretical physics, so there's a lot of logic there. And totally correct me if I'm wrong. From what I know of you, a lot of your decisions aren't necessarily totally based on logic. A lot of it is based on what you feel the market or the markets or the business world is perhaps going to do. So, and I knew nothing about this, so I'm flying with this on the hoof right now. I'm struggling to see how somebody that comes out of higher education with a degree or whatever you got in applied physics can then be such a game changer when it comes to building culture and understanding what a workforce needs to drive the business forwards. Because the two don't seem to be necessarily.
Yeah, well, it's a good point. I think what I had when I started, so I started my career as a strategy consultant.
Right. So it's kind of logic based.
So it's very logic based. You kind of do nothing with people. So the whole people side there is left. It's left aside. It's all about numbers and conclusions and data. It's very hard, but it's a very, very good kind of learning school for kind of business fundamentals. Much better than you'd ever learn at any university. So I had that, and I had the strong determination. And I think on the basis of those two, someone saw the potential in me to become a CEO. Now, when I got promoted to CEO, I was 31. I can tell you, I would have never ever promoted myself into that role, because that would have been so high risk. I don't think I would. But maybe now, but at the time, I
But high risk based upon what? On your logical decision making?
Well, just because I had no experience.
Or perhaps your emotional.
Yeah, so I think you really need three things. You need the logical side, you need the determination, and you need the people side. And that's the P side. Well, maybe it was in me somewhere, but it was not developed, and I wasn't allowing it to open up. So I was basically trying to do everything with a logical. I wanted a proof for every decision, and I wanted numbers, and I wanted people to come up with, really good analysis on why we should do this or that. Yeah. And that's not how.
So your P side, and that's kind of emotional.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say emotional decision making. You can overlay to a certain extent logic on that to an extent, but the people side of business is more emotional. Yeah. It's got to be.
I would say it's also more important than the logical side.
Well, that's got to be a typical.
You have to have both, but I think in the end, people who want to. Well, it depends what you want to do. I mean, if you want to be a researcher in physics and win a Nobel Prize, then the logical side is going to be much more important. But if you want to lead a business, clearly the people side, the emotional side, listening to your gut it's much more important.
And then so on Cho, so you find yourself. I remember climbing Cho Oyu. So you find yourself on the summit. So, and just talk me through what the descent was like. So the summit of Cho Oyu, if people don't know, it's a big plateau. Yeah. It goes on forever.
Endless.
And a bit without oxygen. Yeah. I did it with oxygen.
Yeah.
I did it with a climb. Yeah. So you top up, you come over what's known as the head wall. You come through a little rock band. And it grinds up and it gets progressively flatter and flatter and flatter. And there's a pimple on the left-hand side, which many people think is the summit.
Yeah.
I almost got suckered by that one. But it's not. It feels like it's miles over the back.
I think it took me probably about 90 minutes or something on the plateau, like forever. I can't really remember, but forever.
Gasping for air.
Yeah. And then...
and are you carrying your skis at this stage?
Yeah, the skis were on my back, and there was a Sherpa with me, and it was the weather it wasn't great weather, so it was overclouded, and then so you don't really ever know when you get to the summit, right? And then suddenly there was this spell of a short kind of we could see around us, and we saw Everest.
Oh yeah, you look straight in. It's an amazing view.
And they say that you can only see Everest from the real summit.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so yeah, but anyway, we saw it there, and we looked around and there was no obvious place that was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, there's no trig point. Is there?
No, there's nothing. No, so I thought, wow, this is now it really starts, and I thought, well, I've never felt so shit in my whole life, and now I'm about to do what I've been preparing for the last year. And the descent was really, really hard. I mean, the first part is quite flat, so that was...
Yeah, so you end up... I ended up kind of pushing, and it's wind blown, and you are at 8,000 metres. I've taken my oxygen off at this point. And you've got a big rucksack on, and it's just...
you're just so tired. I was really... I was really, really tired. And we agreed with the Sherpa that we'd stay together. So, I would do a few turns and then wait, and then, I'd almost lie down, and I had to be careful not to fall asleep. That's how exhausted I was. And then I worked back up, and I think I skied to the rock band.
Uh-huh.
I could have gone around.
Well, I was going to say which way to do. So when I skied it, I went skiers right.
Yeah.
Which was the original Tritty line of ascent, and because I was skiing completely on my own, and then I couldn't find a logical way through the rock band. I ended up having to side slip and do a few jump turns through a little gully.
Okay, but you kept your skis on.
I kept my skis on.
Yeah, no, I wasn't able to do that. No. So when we were there, it was a complete whiteout on the descent. I couldn't see anything anymore. Jeez. So it was a bit. I thought, it's not. And then we arrived in Camp 3, I think at 7 p.m.
Oh wow!
So a bit late, far too late. It's pretty amazing actually. I was in my tent on my own. I didn't drink or eat anything, and I slept for 12 hours non-stop. Yeah. Which is at 7,500 meters. I don't think is very common. I just slept like a baby for 12 hours, and I woke up the next day, and I was very hungry, very thirsty. And then that descent, it was sunny. That descent was just amazing, and we were the first expedition to, we were about a week and a half ahead of everyone else. Okay,
so you pretty much had the mountain, because that mountain gets really busy.
Yeah, exactly. So we were all alone. Wow. But then from below Camp 3, I think even below Camp 2, where there's a piece where just before the ice cliff, there's people on the fixed ropes, and they're working really hard to climb up, and I was just
you're making some turns down.
And that was
high-fiving.
That was really surreal. You could see them like, oh, am I hallucinating? Is there a guy coming down on his skis? So that was really fun. And then the last part, I kept my skis on, but I was clicked into the rope
over the ice. I did the same thing. So you come over that ice. There's a steep ice band in there, which you normally tumor up, and I kind of repelled my skis.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. Yeah. And then the last bit, it's real fun.
Yeah, the last bit's really nice actually. Into Camp 1, and then I had to take my skis off and walk down.
Yeah, exactly. It's a long way.
Yeah,
I remember that. Yeah.
Well, 2004. So that must have been a relatively early, because it's only in the last 10 years, if that skiing on Cho Oyu or Manaslu, they've become relatively.
No, I don't think. I think by the time like 25 people had done it, something like that. But it was quite hard to research it at the time.
Yeah,
wow. It wasn't as well documented as it is now. Huh. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. Amazing.
And how does? Because you made the analogy right at the start of this little conversation about how important it is to have somebody like your wife in support. Yeah. And you said it's and you use the analogy as a base camp manager, and you've got your base camp, and you're doing things from base camp, but you need somebody solid at base camp. What do you think you leave university with a very logical degree? And then you throw yourself into what sounds like a number of expeditions. What part of those expeditions do you think have helped with, say, the people side of things? Because you're having to deal with, I don't want to answer the question for you, but I find that when I go on expeditions, no matter where it is, you're having to deal with the base camp staff, maybe the Sherpa staff. You've got other people within your team who may have different objectives to your own. Or you have a common vision that you want to climb the mountain or do the run or the row or the sail, whatever it is. But people always have different motivations and objectives, even though they have a common goal. What do you think you've learned from the adventure side of your life, which translates? Or vice versa.
I think probably a lot less than what you expect me to say. No, I think also because on the Cho Oyu, for example, we had a very small team. So it was just myself and a friend, and another friend who went to base camp in Cape 1, and he was a doctor. Okay. So the only reason he was there is just to make sure that we were all safe. And then we had a cook and 3 Sherpas. That's it. Right. So a very small team. And we wanted to have a very small team. We weren't interested at all in working with other people, just because we thought, that's only going to give us lots of problems. So we could be a lot earlier than anyone else, and we had the mountain to ourselves. And so in that way, I think it was fairly easy to manage all of that without having good people skills. But yeah, so I'm not sure I learned that much. We did have initially the doctor initially said, I want a summit as well. and we Joost and I, who were meant to summit together, had an issue with that, and those discussions were a bit complicated. But it sorted itself out in the sense that he just it wasn't going to happen. Yeah. But
it wasn't going to happen because
he wasn't fit enough and maybe not prepared to suffer enough, and so even going to Camp 1, that was a hard journey for him.
But it's hard work up that ski slope.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, oh. and he ended up having saving at least 2 lives from people from other expeditions when we were there. So which was quite which made the expedition even more kind of special and weird. A guy that ended up telemarking from the summit of Everest on the
north side.
On the Hornbein.
Who was that?
I'll look up his name. But a guy from Sweden.
Like I say, he's one of Swedish guys.
Yeah, there's also a guy who was one of his friends that died there.
Thomas Olsen died.
On the Japanese couloir, I think, was it? The Japanese or the Hornbein? I can't remember.
Might have been the Hornbein. Yeah, so that's 2006, I think he died, Thomas Olsen. Yeah. Because I was on Everest and a chopper went across from the Nepalese side into Tibet, which is one of the first times he's ever done it. So into Tibet, picked the body up and brought it back.
Oh really?
So they repatriated
that body. You mean?
Thomas Olsen. So they repatriated his body through Nepal, not through China. So I don't quite know how that worked out politically, but that's what. Yeah. Big Mi-17 went in to pick up the body.
Yeah, well then I'd rather have my body in Nepal than in Tibet, to be honest.
Anyway, and so, wow. I mean, I just. I've got to come back to the life balance. When I think it might have been when we last met, or maybe the time before that. So this is going back a couple of years now.
Yeah.
We were in the offices. In your office at Kemble, which is the head office for
Cotswold and Snow Rock.
Cotswold, Snow Rock, and
psychosurgery,
which is just up the road from here. Beautiful location, actually.
Yeah,
good for going out running at lunchtime.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you mentioned that you had an idea or vision of when you finished at Cotswold, that you would like to take the family to somewhere like Nepal.
Yeah.
By the sound of it, you had the village in mind in a lower Solar Khumbu. So that's beneath Lukla, and you were going to spend 6 months, 9 months there.
Yeah.
Pretty much off grid, away from life as such as we know it. Just talk me through the idea behind that, because that's a significant shift.
Yeah.
Not just for you, but for everybody. Within the family. At the time, you would have had 3 children.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not making a wife yet, but I've seen pictures. Beautiful wife and yourself, high flying CEO, crushing the adventure side of things. You're running. You've always been known for a runner, and then you were just going to decamp to somewhere like Nepal in a little village.
Well, I think the idea was that I think I already knew at the time that it comes back to the balance side. Actually, that I think that I was CEO for about 10 years in different businesses, and always had some kind of adventures on the being it climbing high mountains or ultra runs or whatever, and managing the family. And I think at a point I realized it is also, it creates balance in your life, but it also demands a lot, as if there's not much room to relax. I would never relax. It's funny you mentioned Boulder. So actually the friend that I was on Cho Oyu with, he just moved to Boulder.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he has a startup in travel, which obviously is not great. But before this, he had another travel company that he ended up selling. But I remember him working with an athlete on a number of articles. It was Thomas Olsen, actually. They were working closely together on 2006 on that.
Have you been to Boulder?
No, I haven't. So I have to go now.
Boulder's pretty incredible. If you go, let me know.
Of the US?
It doesn't have the skiing on its doorstep, but there's something like 28 Olympic athletes are based there.
Yeah.
300 days a year sunshine, access to trails, access to biking, climbing. It's all there. And the other interesting thing is it's big enough to have a critical mass. There are startups, there are tech startups, there's finance there. And it's a pretty special place. Yeah. But it's not the poor. And it's really interesting.
Well, it's quite different,
it's quite interesting this morning, because I woke up this morning and a friend of mine, acquaintance of mine, Mike Weeks, he was living, actually I think he was living in Boulder. And he's just emigrated to Indonesia.
Yeah.
Right. And I was reading that this morning and thinking, wow, what a life change that is. They started in the UK, they've gone to Boulder, and now they're in Indonesia.
Yeah. Right.
And I was thinking about the impact that was having on their children. Not in a negative way, but in a positive way, to see the different cultures, to see the different people interact. I just thought it was very, very powerful, and also quite brave and bold of Mike and his beautiful wife Bean. Fascinating. It'd be interesting to hear how your vision unfolds over the next.
Well, I mean, I'd be incredibly proud if we made it to Nepal, but that wasn't on my mind before you came in. So
it's not on the agenda just yet. So talk me through the last 7-8 months. Lockdown, I suppose. When did you leave always the name
Outdoor and Cycle Concepts, ONCC. Outdoor and Cycle Concepts.
ONCC.
Don't ask me why, but
anyway, so the big group that you were heading up. You essentially took a sideways step when the twins came along, and I did hear through the grapevine that they were really very unwell. Luckily, from what you say, they're on the up. They're getting stronger. And
they're good. They're really good.
Fantastic. But you took a bit of a sideways step there. That was 18 months ago.
So that was in April 2019.
And then since then, work-wise, I know you've been doing a little bit of consultancy here.
Yeah, so last year I was quite keen to go back and do some kind of work, but just it wasn't on the table. Just like because the twins were unwell, so they stayed in hospital for 3 months. The smallest one was 850 grams.
Oh my goodness!
And the other one was 1.2 kilos. So there were times. Wow. So
that's
2.5 months.
Kind of in the palm of your hand.
I mean it's a little bit more than a pint. So they initially 2.5 months in hospital, and then came home on oxygen, and then readmitted 15 times last year into hospital. Sometimes for 2 days, sometimes for 2 weeks, including intensive care treatments, and quite scary. But my wife developed a neurological disease where she couldn't move either of her arms. And that was 10 days before the birth.
Wow.
So basically I had my wife and 2 babies in hospital. Yeah. I had 3 kids.
3 children
to
look after.
At home, and I was in the office. And I just thought, this doesn't make sense. And then, it didn't make any sense to try and do any work. Well, I was very, very lucky that I didn't have to go to work to feed my children. Yeah. I had that privilege. And with that need covered, it just made so much more sense just to stay with my family and try and support everyone. And then this year, I had kind of agreed a 2-day a week kind of advisory role, which was started on the 1st of April, which got knocked out by COVID, for many. And then, more recently, I've been doing 2 things. One, I've been looking at a startup, launching my own venture. And the second one, doing a bit of advisory work for different companies, UK and Netherlands based. Yeah.
Wow. And a lot of running.
That's I think what kept me together the last 18 months is the running.
That's interesting. Yeah. Because it gives you the space.
Well, I think
escapism.
Especially in lockdown. I'm sure many people recognize it, but 5 kids at home, very needy, especially the 2 youngest ones. Yeah. My wife still not in great physical and mental shape. So just going out for a run, I would often put the 2 twins in the buggy and take them. That would put the pressure off my wife, so she could do something with the other kids. They could have a nap while I'm running. I could run. I'd come back fully energized. So that was one of my survival tricks.
You do know there's a world record for running with children.
Rob Forbes has it. Forbes. Yeah, I know. Yeah, but clearly out of my reach.
It's about 2 hours 40.
Yeah, I think even without a buggy, I think I'd struggle on that time. So very incredibly fast.
And more recently, I know that you've been focusing on some of the British, well, we call them rounds. Yeah. So you were up in North Wales, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, yeah.
And that was on the
Paddy Buckley round.
Yeah. Which is 40-odd, 3,000 foot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Peaks.
Yeah.
How far is that one?
It's about 106 kilometres.
106 kilometres and a lot of up.
Yeah, I think the vert is
down.
Close to 9,000 metres.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So it's it goes up and down all the time. Yeah. And end of June, I did the Bob Graham round.
Oh, did you? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
End of June.
Yeah, so that went really well. That was an awesome day out.
So the Bob Graham, for those that don't know, is a similar thing. It's a lot of the peaks in the Lake District, and it's about 70 miles.
About 70 miles. It's 42 peaks, and again about 8,500 meters of vertical ascent. So that was amazing. It was one of the hottest days of the year.
Oh, was it?
I got really dehydrated, but it was lovely. And then the Paddy Buckley 2 weeks ago, I was out there with some friends, and they were supporting me. They were awesome, but I just didn't have a good day. I wasn't having fun, and that's very unlike me. If I'm in the mountains and running, that's like the best thing that can happen to me. But I was somehow, I don't know, I lost my mother a few months ago, and my sister gave birth last week. She became a mother.
Oh wow! Is that the first time?
Yeah.
So you're now Uncle Greg.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're gonna be a good uncle or bad? Well, not a bad uncle, but are you gonna be the wayward uncle, the one that comes in and the children always love, and everybody gets really excited? And
I think it depends on what the child needs. I don't know if the child needs a bit more adventure, then I'll try and be that patient. If the child needs calm, my sister's a ski journalist, so she travels all around the world.
Oh, ski journalist!
Wow. to go to these most amazing places and just ski lots of powder.
That sounds rubbish.
So very, very hard work. And on side of that, she works for Booking.com. So another company that's been massively hit by.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned skiing and your sister. I'm right in saying that you represented Holland ski mountaineering or skimo.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think we were sponsored by both the Dutch Climbing Association and the Dutch Skiing Association. We went to Cho Oyu, and then after that, the Dutch Climbing Association organised the ski mountaineering championships, which I've won 3 times. But the first time I think there were about 12 people taking place.
But you can still claim that you're a national champion.
Yeah, 3 times.
3 times.
Yeah, 3 times. Yeah.
So you summited an 8,000 meter peak. You are running things like the Bob Graham round inside 24 hours, which is for many trail runners massively aspirational. You've 3 times national champion. You've headed up a number of firms. You're now working it. Did you sometimes think?
I think I was just lucky to be Dutch. It's the flattest country in the world, and I went after some more.
No, but in general, do you sit down with your glass of wine sometimes and go? I know you wouldn't. I'm being a bit tongue in cheek, but do you sit down and say, "God, yeah, I'm"?
Well, it's funny because it's actually a really funny story. I'm really be honest. What the family's been through the last 18 months has been hard.
Yeah, well, I can't imagine.
And even my time at Cotswold and Snow and Rock, was a hard time. And that company is struggling. It's a really hard time for retail.
Yeah, you took it on at a difficult time.
So it was a different kind of experience than at Bever when it was all like wow, fantastic and great. And this was there's a lot of restructuring involved and There's lots of things where I thought actually, with hindsight, I could have done better. So I was insecure for the last. I've been. It's been a hard time, both family wise and business wise. So I've been a lot more insecure. And then I think just when lockdown started, Dave Cool, who you also know, I was on his podcast. And
Eat Your Greens.
Exactly, yeah, Eat Your Greens podcast. And then I was listening back to it, and there was this introduction from him saying, similar thing to what you were just saying. And I think, wow, that guy's actually really cool. And I realized, that's me. And I needed to hear that to remind myself, okay, it doesn't really matter what you're going to do, but if you just put your head to it and you try really hard, you'll be fine. So don't, just have the confidence in yourself. And that was really funny it took me to listen back to that podcast to realise, like, oh yeah, I'd almost forgotten about those things.
Well,
so maybe I should take the glass of wine and like...
Well, yeah, but it's a really interesting observation, because from the outside, people like myself or Dave or others, we look at these aspirational CEOs and athletes, and I think I said at the start, I find the combination intoxicating. And there's a few people, Topher Gaylord, that used to head up Mountain Hardware, very good runner, he balanced it. Yeah. Simon Green, another friend of mine, he's balanced it. Michael Lavelle, to a certain extent, he's a phenomenal cyclist. Summited Everest with me. He's heads up City Group UK Ireland.
Yeah,
there's these guys that seem to find the balance, and I do find it incredibly intoxicating. And I look at you guys as a form of motivation and to a certain extent inspiration, and how you find the balance. And in my talking now, I've completely forgotten what my question was going to be.
Okay.
I hate it when that happens.
But was it about like a self-confidence and looking?
Oh yeah, it's exactly that. Yeah. So from the outside, you guys seem to be bulletproof. So it's really interesting that you openly say that you were struggling a little bit with self-confidence and things that go with
Well, I don't know. I think that no one is that. I even think like someone like Eliud Kipchoge, who, didn't win the marathon on Sunday. Like for a lot of people, it's like, oh, it's a drama. But I'm sure he'll be wondering in one way, like, oh, can I actually come back? And he probably can. And I think everyone doubts himself. But a lot of the people, I think, don't let themselves be aware of that, and they'll definitely not show it to other people. But actually, I've learned that actually listening to those questions in your mind, saying, can you do it, and accepting them and being aware of them helps a lot. And also just, I'm not afraid to say that I've been through, it's been a harder time. And because that's when you grow. So, I think always pretending like everything is great and fantastic, in which, social media sometimes can lead people to believe, is that's not what life is about. Everyone has setbacks. I just lost my mother. Of course, that's been really hard, and it's not like I'm immune to anything. No, I mean, I've been grieving for that, and I still will, and it's going to affect me. And everyone has a mother, and at some point, people might lose their mother, and it's a hard thing. But that's not. I'm not the only one going through that.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's admitting to yourself that we do have good days and we do have bad days. Yeah, and it's the way that we handle the bad days as well as we handle the good days. Yeah, and that's really important. Because life isn't all roses.
Of course not.
It's
for no one.
It's
for no one. No, and I think almost in a way, like I talked about those 10 years when I was working really hard and exercising really hard and raising a young family. I think in that kind of, we spoke about balance. I think that in that balance for me, there was not that much room to reflect on my uncertainties or things that were tougher, because it would almost take me out of that kind of that rhythm where people think, oh, he's a CEO and he's a good father and he's a good husband and he's amazing, he's an inspiration, and you kind of almost become that person that people think you are.
That's really interesting.
And so I think there you also put yourself in a position where it's almost not okay to be that vulnerable. At least for me, I've been a lot more vulnerable and reflective about who I am and what I love in the last 18 months than I have been before. And I'm not sure if I'd want to go back to working 80 hours a week and running and living such a fast life. Yeah,
it's quite interesting. So were you feeding off that fast life? I.e., Jazz, my wife, and I sort of pre-lockdown, we would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go into London for like a raft of meetings. I'll be on a plane there, and Jazz is client facing. We try and juggle the children, but somehow we were feeding off that, and we were constantly on fumes, constantly juggling diaries. And I would sometimes get in at say 3 o'clock in the morning and pretty much high five Jazz, and she would leave to go to work, and it was insane. But we gained momentum from one another by doing that. Fast forward 10 months to where we are now, and looking back on it, I don't know how we coped with that.
Yeah.
It just now, from where we stand now, it seems completely incomprehensill. I can't believe that it was working.
I completely relate to that, and I would I go as far as saying I don't even know if I want to go back, because at the time it feels fun.
Yeah.
But I think the question for me is it sustainable? Is it something that you want to keep doing all the time? I guess when you're approaching a deadline or whatever, there's going to be times where it's crazy and you need to do it. But is that the kind of life that really makes you happy? Is when you're like always running and closing the holes and like really kind of a very high level of positive stress. That I think that's the positive stress that if you then allow yourself to reflect on what you're doing and why you're doing it, and maybe accept that I'm not having as good as a day today, is that suddenly the system can collapse. So there's almost no room to be a bit weaker. And I think allowing yourself to reflect is really important.
I think it's critical, and I think it's critical in order to grow in a positive way.
But some people, might be able to do both, and maybe I'll become, But I don't think in the past I've done that.
Do you meditate at all?
I've meditated quite a bit during lockdown. I really enjoyed it. I find it difficult, very difficult.
No, I'm the same. I've dabbled every now and then, and I find, I'm certainly not a meditation guru, but I find, I find it quite soothing.
Yeah,
I think
definitely. We did this abundance challenge thing that took 21 days from Deepak Chopra. And I loved it. It was really, And one of the things I did a lot during lockdown, which again is a habit I've sort of lost, is on a run, when I went out running, I talk to myself.
Oh, do you?
Because I work with a coach.
Yeah.
And he always asks me these questions, and it's always very insightful. He just asks questions.
Yeah.
But I thought, I can just ask myself those questions. So you ask yourself the questions, and suddenly you're like... Do
you say it aloud?
Yeah, I just talk to myself. Yeah. People, if I ever see anyone on the trails, I'm like, who's this weird guy? But it definitely helps me create a much stronger awareness of how I'm feeling and what's going on, and sometimes realize like, I'm completely off the ball on this. I should be focusing more on this or that. So that is really helpful. Actually, it's a really easy tool, but I guess you just need to learn the questions a bit. But it was quite.
No, I might look into that, because I do a lot of running. Never use earphones. I don't listen to music. I like being at one with my surroundings, as long as the surroundings are nice. I might try that.
It's fun.
There's so much I want to keep going, but I am very conscious of your time. And at some stage we've got to park this. We haven't touched upon diet and nutrition. I know that you're pretty much plant-based.
Aside from dairy. I think we eat quite a lot of dairy, and occasionally some meat, but not much.
So maybe... you don't live that far away from me. We'll have you on again, perhaps, and we can talk about that. But what's next? So I know you're still in the process of making sure the family unit is strong and healthy and moving forward. Work, I'm getting the drift from you. It's a little bit up in the air. I'll be fascinated to hear about your startup, but again, we can talk about that at some other time. What's your immediate?
Well, I think
short term.
I think now it feels like for the first time in 18 months, maybe a bit longer, we've come back to normality in the sense that I'm doing some work, there's income, the family is healthy, the kids are back to school. So, like the health of the kids improved and we started to feel like everything went back to normal in March, and then lockdown happened. So now for the first time, it feels like things are a bit back to normal. So there's a part of me saying, let's just enjoy that. I think I have a lot of ambitions on the work side. I want to. I really believe in the outdoor sector, and I believe that people are healthier outside, and that's where my venture is going. I'm not yet convinced whether it is now the right time for me because of where I am, but also I'm a bit nervous about what's going to happen with lockdowns and stuff, and if this is the right moment to jump in, because my business would involve buying a company.
Right.
So and there's a question about where we're going to live. Are we going to live here? Are we going to go back to Holland?
On the pool?
Are we going to go to the pool? That was less on the table this morning, but now maybe is. But also, why don't we go live in Chamonix? There's also there's that piece, and I think part of that puzzle is going to come around when professionally I've figured out what's really going to be next. If I buy a company that's based in Annecy or Chamonix, why not go live there?
No, absolutely. Yeah, well, having spent nearly 6 years living in Chamonix, it's certainly an interesting place, for sure. So the last thing, and then we'll wrap it up. Your life, I believe, has been pretty incredible up to this point. There's been highs, there's been lows, there's been everything packed into that. If you had the opportunity to roll back to stepping out of university with your analytical physics degree in your back pocket, what potentially would you have done differently?
Oh, that's a great question. Really hard one. I think I definitely at university I had loads of fun, but I also feel like I wasted so much time, hours and hours and hours a week. Maybe
I think we all do.
Easy, maybe 20 hours a week, just drinking beer and you can't distinct one evening from the other. So there's a part of me saying that was great to have so much fun, but I would have loved to spend much more time in the mountains then when I had the time. That's one. I don't think there are many other things I'd really do differently. That's really hard. I mean, I'd really love to go back and do those years again, where you didn't have kids yet and you're flexible and you could do whatever you want, when you want, how you want it. But looking at our at the journey as a family, I'm really proud of my children, and I think I'm pretty happy as things are, to be honest.
Well, I don't think you can say anything more powerful to finish on. Being happy is the single most important thing I think any of us can be. Greg, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Kenton. Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you. Yeah.
We'll speak soon.
Yeah.